The Arizona desert knew how to keep secrets. Secrets buried beneath layers of sand and stone, under endless blue skies that had witnessed centuries of blood spilled across the parched earth. Mason Cole knew something about secrets too, and about blood. Three bodies lay sprawled in the dust, their fingers still warm on the triggers of guns they'd never fire again. Mason holstered his Colt 1873 single-action Army, the metal still hot against his thigh. His breathing steadied as he surveyed the men who tried to steal his horses not 10 minutes earlier. "Should have just asked for water," he muttered, wincing as he examined the bullet graze across his left arm. The desert wind carried the iron scent of blood as Mason tore a strip from his shirt, binding the wound with the efficiency of a man who'd done it many times before. His weathered face, tanned and lined from 20 years under the southwestern sun, betrayed no pain. At 42, Mason Cole was a relic of a war most tried to forget, a Confederate sharpshooter who'd found no peace in surrender. He mounted his stallion, feeling the familiar ache in his right knee, a souvenir from Gettysburg. As he rode away from the dead men, memories flickered like heat mirages. A cabin in flames, a woman's scream silenced by gunfire, a child's hand going limp in his own. Mason pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on the horizon. The past was a luxury he couldn't afford. The sun climbed higher as Mason followed a set of wagon tracks cutting through the canyon. Something about them felt wrong, too deep, too erratic. He'd learned to trust such instincts in the war. They kept a man breathing when others stopped. The tracks led to a narrow pass between towering red cliffs. Mason dismounted, drew his rifle, and approached cautiously. The sight that greeted him would have shocked a lesser man into carelessness. 4 Apache women were bound to the remnants of a broken wagon, their skin blistered from exposure, lips cracked from thirst. Vultures circled overhead, patient for their feast. Mason scanned the perimeter, rifle ready before approaching. This had all the markings of a trap. One of the women raised her head weakly. Recognition flashed in her dark eyes. "Ghost Rider," she whispered in broken English, "the one who speaks with thunder." Mason recognized her immediately. Kaya, daughter of Chief Wolf Thunder. They had met 3 years earlier during peace negotiations when Mason had served as a scout for the Army. He had impressed the Apache by speaking a few words of their language and showing respect for their customs, a rare quality among white men. "Who did this?" Mason asked, cutting through their bonds with his hunting knife. Kaya's voice was hoarse from thirst. "Colonel Blackwood. He wants the sacred mountain, the place of yellow stone." Mason's blood ran cold. Colonel Harlan Blackwood, a name he'd spent 5 years hunting, the man responsible for the raid that had killed his wife Sarah and daughter Emma, the man who'd escaped justice through political connections and wartime chaos. "Here," Mason offered his canteen. "Drink slow." As the women drank, Kaya explained, Blackwood led a group of miners and former soldiers hunting for a legendary Apache gold mine. They had captured the women to extract information about the mine's location, then left them to die when they refused to speak. "How many men?" Mason asked, helping the weakest woman to shade beneath an overhanging rock. 30, maybe more. They have new rifles, Army rifles." Mason nodded grimly. Winchester 73s and Henry repeaters against Apache bows and lances. A massacre waiting to happen. The sudden crack of a rifle shot sent dust spraying near Mason's boots. He rolled behind a boulder, drawing his Colt in one fluid motion. 8 riders emerged from behind the canyon wall, rifles aimed and ready. "Ladies, stay down," Mason called, squeezing off 2 shots that found their marks. 2 riders toppled from their saddles. The remaining attackers spread out, seeking cover. These weren't common bandits. They moved with military precision. Mason recognized the tactics from his days in Virginia. A bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing through shirt and skin. Mason gritted his teeth and returned fire, counting shots, measuring angles. Another man fell. To his surprise, Kaya had retrieved a knife from somewhere and was moving with startling speed toward one of the attackers. Before the man could aim, she'd buried the blade in his throat with deadly precision. 5 attackers remained, their positions strengthening as Mason's ammunition dwindled. He had 3 bullets left in his revolver and no clear path to his rifle's ammunition pouch. That's when the unexpected shot rang out from the ridge above. One of the attackers clutched his chest and toppled forward. Another shot, another man down. The remaining 3 broke cover, riding hard for the canyon exit. Mason didn't waste the opportunity. 3 shots, 3 bodies hitting the dust. "Still the best shot east of the Mississippi," called a familiar voice, "though I reckon we're west of it now." A tall figure emerged from behind the rocks above, rifle resting casually against his shoulder. Jackson Reeves, former Union Army scout, and the closest thing Mason had to a friend in this unforgiving territory. "Your timing's improved since Antietam," Mason replied, wincing as he stood. Jackson slid down from his position, landing with the agility of a man half his 50 years. "Been tracking these boys for 3 days. They work for Blackwood." "I know." Jackson eyed the Apache women, then the bodies scattered around them. "This complicates things." "It always does." Mason pressed a hand against his bleeding shoulder. The world tilted slightly, darkness creeping at the edges of his vision. Kaya approached, studying his wound. "You need medicine, strong medicine." "I'll be fine," Mason muttered, though the pallor of his skin betrayed him. "Our village is 1 day's ride," Kaya insisted. "My father will help the man who saved his daughter." Jackson looked skeptical. "The Apache aren't fond of unexpected white visitors." "They're less fond of dying," Mason countered, swaying slightly. "And without warning, Blackwood will slaughter the whole village." Decision made, they helped the weakened women onto horses. Mason fought to stay conscious as they rode, the Arizona sun beating down mercilessly. His last clear thought before darkness claimed him was that fate had a cruel sense of humor, delivering Blackwood to him when he was in no condition to settle their score. Mason awoke to the scent of burning sage and the low, rhythmic chanting of an Apache medicine man. He lay inside a wickiup, the traditional dome-shaped dwelling of the Apache. Pain radiated from his shoulder, but the wound had been packed with a poultice of herbs that smelled of earth and pine. When he tried to sit up, strong hands pressed him back down. "The bullet carried bad spirits," said an elderly Apache man, his face a map of wrinkles and wisdom. "They must be drawn out, or you will die." Mason had no strength to argue. Outside, he could hear the murmur of voices, angry voices, demanding something in Apache. He recognized one word repeated often: Indai, enemy. The entrance flap opened, and Chief Wolf Thunder stepped inside. His imposing frame blocked the sunlight, casting Mason in shadow. Decades of warfare had left their mark on the chief's face. A scar ran from temple to jaw, and his left ear was missing half its shell. But it was his eyes that commanded attention, dark, intelligent, and evaluating. "My daughter says you saved her life," the chief said in precise English. "This gives you 1 day to live. Convince me why you should have 2. Mason met the chief's gaze without flinching. "Colonel Blackwood plans to attack your village. 30 men with military weapons. They want the gold mine, but that's just the beginning. Once they have a foothold here, more will come." Wolf Thunder's expression remained impassive. "And you care about this because Blackwood murdered my family 5 years ago. I've been hunting him ever since." A flicker of understanding passed over the chief's features. "Ah, vengeance. This my people understand." "Justice," Mason corrected. "Vengeance is quick. Justice takes patience." Wolf Thunder studied him for a long moment before nodding once. We will speak more when you can stand. Over the next 3 days, Mason's strength returned gradually. The Apache medicine proved remarkably effective, drawing out infection and accelerating healing. Jackson, meanwhile, had been scouting Blackwood's camp, returning with troubling news. On the fourth morning, Mason joined a council of Apache warriors gathered around the central fire. Kaya sat at her father's right hand, her gaze meeting Mason's briefly before returning to the flames. Jackson spread out a rough map drawn on deerskin. Blackwood's men are here, 12 miles south. They're building a permanent camp, not just a mining operation. They've got enough supplies for months. One of the warriors, a muscular man with a bear claw necklace whom Mason had heard called Red Hawk, spat into the fire. We should attack now, while we have surprise. With what? Jackson challenged. Their rifles can kill from 300 yards. Your bows might manage 60. Red Hawk's hand moved to his knife. Our ancestors did not need white man's weapons to survive. Your ancestors, Mason interjected, didn't face Winchester rifles. The tension crackled like the fire before them. Chief Wolf Thunder raised a hand for silence. What do you propose, Mason Cole? Before Mason could answer, Jackson tossed a folded paper into the center of the circle. This changes everything. Founded on a scout they sent too close to your hunting grounds. Mason unfolded the paper, a letter bearing the letterhead of the Southern Pacific Railroad Company. As he read, his jaw tightened. Blackwood isn't just after gold, Mason announced. He's working for the railroad. They want to provoke a war, a massacre big enough to justify Army intervention. Once the Army removes you, the railroad gets your land. The gold is just a bonus. Murmurs of anger spread through the circle. Wolf Thunder's face darkened like a thundercloud. How long? The chief asked. 2 weeks, Jackson replied. That's when the Army inspection team passes through Fort Whipple. If Blackwood can create a savage Apache uprising before then, the implication hung heavy in the desert air. We must prepare, Wolf Thunder decided. Red Hawk, organize hunting parties to gather food. We may need to leave quickly. He turned to Mason. You know how these men think, how they fight. Will you teach our warriors? Mason looked around the circle of faces, proud, fierce, and now worried. He thought of Sarah and Emma, of promises made at gravesides. Yes, he said simply, I'll teach them. The days that followed took on the urgency of armies preparing for war. Mason instructed the Apache warriors on defensive tactics against rifle fire, how to approach without being seen, and where to strike to disable rather than kill, knowledge that might prevent the massacre Blackwood sought to provoke. Jackson fortified the village perimeter, establishing a warning system of hidden lookouts that would give them precious minutes of preparation if attacked. Throughout it all, Kaya worked alongside them, translating when necessary, but mostly observing Mason with quiet intensity. She was unlike any woman Mason had ever known, capable of startling violence when threatened, yet gentle when tending the village children. She spoke little of herself, but Mason learned she had been educated by missionaries before returning to her people, choosing tradition over the white man's world that had rejected her. On the seventh day, the fragile peace within the village shattered. Red Hawk, returning from a hunting expedition, confronted Mason before the entire tribe. You teach us to hide and run, he accused, voice carrying across the central clearing. These are not the ways of Apache warriors. These are the ways of cowards. Mason had endured the warriors' hostility for days, recognizing it as the natural reaction of a proud man confronted with change. But with time running short, patience was a luxury. Is it cowardice to be smart? Mason challenged. The wolf doesn't attack the buffalo from the front. He waits, he watches, he strikes where it matters. Red Hawk stepped closer, towering over Mason by several inches. Words, always words from this white man. Perhaps his spirit matches his pale skin, weak and easily broken. The watching crowd tensed. Even Wolf Thunder remained silent, allowing the confrontation to unfold. Mason understood what was happening. Authority among warriors wasn't granted, it was proven. "You want to test me?" Mason asked quietly. "Let's do it properly then." What followed was as much ritual as fight. The tribe formed a circle in the clearing, women and children watching from the edges. Mason removed his gun belt, knife and shirt, facing Red Hawk bare-chested under the afternoon sun. The Apache warrior was younger, stronger, and fueled by a lifetime of fighting for survival. But Mason carried something just as powerful: the desperate focus of a man who'd lost everything once and refused to fail again. The fight was brutal and swift. Red Hawk attacked with explosive force, landing blows that would have felled most men. Mason absorbed the punishment, waiting for openings, striking with precision rather than power. Blood streamed from cuts above Mason's eye and across his ribs. His breathing grew ragged. But when Red Hawk charged again, Mason sidestepped, redirecting the warrior's momentum into a devastating throw that left him gasping in the dust. Mason could have pressed his advantage, but instead he stepped back, offering Red Hawk the chance to rise with dignity. The warrior stood slowly, blood trickling from his nose. For a long moment, the two men faced each other in silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, Red Hawk extended his hand. "You fight like the bear," he said. "Not the strongest first strike, but the one who endures." Mason clasped the offered forearm. The strongest warrior isn't always the one left standing. It's the one whose people survive. That night, Mason found himself welcomed at the fire where the tribal elders gathered. Wolf Thunder offered him the pipe of counsel, a profound honor for an outsider. As smoke spiraled upward to the star-filled sky, the chief spoke of ancient times, of his people's connection to this land, and of his fears for their future. Kaya sat nearby, listening. When their eyes met across the flames, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits forged in loss and determination. Later, as Mason prepared to sleep, Kaya approached, carrying something wrapped in soft buckskin. "For you," she said, extending the bundle. "It belonged to my brother who died fighting soldiers." Mason unwrapped the gift, a beautifully crafted protective amulet, a small medicine pouch adorned with intricate beadwork and a single eagle feather. "I cannot accept this," he said, understanding its significance. "You must," she insisted. "It does not protect against bullets or blades, but against losing your spirit in battle. My brother's body died, but his spirit remains strong. You will need this strength for what comes." Before Mason could respond, shouts erupted from the edge of the village. Jackson burst into view, dragging a struggling Apache warrior whose hands were bound. "Iron Snake has betrayed us," Jackson announced. "Caught him riding toward Blackwood's camp with maps of our defenses." The village erupted in chaos. Iron Snake was brought before Wolf Thunder, his treachery confirmed by evidence found in his possession. Gold coins and a written promise of protection. "Blackwood knows our plans," Mason realized grimly. "We've lost our advantage." Wolf Thunder's face was carved from stone as he pronounced judgment on the traitor. Iron Snake would face tribal justice, but the immediate crisis demanded attention. "We must strike first," Jackson urged. "Hit their camp tonight before they can organize." Mason shook his head. "That's exactly what Blackwood wants. Apache warriors attacking white men. It plays perfectly into his narrative." "Then what?" Red Hawk demanded. "Wait for death to come to our doorstep?" As arguments raged around the council fire, Mason studied the crude map of Blackwood's camp. A desperate plan formed in his mind, one with little chance of success, but perhaps their only option. "We don't attack the camp," he said finally. "3 of us infiltrate it. We find proof of Blackwood's conspiracy with the railroad, and we capture him alive." Silence fell over the gathering. "3?" Wolf Thunder questioned. Me, Jackson, and one who knows Apache paths invisible to white eyes. All heads turned to Kaya, the obvious choice. Her skills as a tracker were unmatched in the tribe. My daughter does not go, Wolf Thunder declared. Kaya rose to her feet. Father, I am the one they tortured. I am the one who escaped. I know their camp. Her voice carried the quiet authority that Mason had come to admire. And I have sworn to see Blackwood answer for his crimes against our people. The chief's face reflected the impossible choice before him, a leader's duty against a father's love. If she dies, he told Mason, his voice like gravel, not even your spirits will find all the pieces of you. Moonlight transformed the desert into a silver landscape as three figures moved silently toward Blackwood's camp. Mason led, with Kaya guiding their path through nearly invisible game trails, and Jackson covering their rear. The camp sprawled in a natural basin, surprisingly well organized with military precision. Guards patrolled in predictable patterns. Blackwood's men were confident, perhaps overconfident, in their position. There, Kaya whispered, pointing to a large tent set apart from the others. Blackwood's quarters. They waited, watching the guards' rotation, identifying the brief window when they could slip through. Remember, Mason cautioned, we need Blackwood alive and the documents. Nothing else matters. When the moment came, they moved like shadows across the moonlit ground. Jackson disabled the nearest guard with a swift, silent blow to the head, while Kaya and Mason slipped into Blackwood's tent. The interior was unexpectedly luxurious. A camp desk, leather chair, and even a small oriental rug. Maps and papers were arranged with military precision. Mason immediately began searching through documents while Kaya kept watch at the entrance. Here, Mason whispered, holding up several papers. Letters from the railroad, orders for weapons, payoff lists for officials. He tucked them securely inside his shirt. A noise outside froze them both. The flap opened, and Colonel Harlan Blackwood stepped into the tent. Time seemed to stop as Blackwood registered their presence. He was older than Mason remembered. Hair now steel gray, face more lined. But the cold blue eyes remained unchanged. Eyes that had watched impassively as Mason's world burned. Well, Blackwood said with remarkable composure, this saves me the trouble of hunting you down, Cole. Mason's hand hovered near his holstered Colt. You remember me. I remember all my mistakes. Not killing you that night was certainly one of them. Blackwood's gaze shifted to Kaya. And the Apache witch who escaped. My lucky night indeed. Outside, a shout went up. Jackson had been discovered. The element of surprise was lost. It's over, Blackwood, Mason said, drawing his revolver. We have the railroad contracts, the evidence of your plan. Blackwood smiled thinly. Evidence? You fool. This isn't some Eastern courtroom. This is the frontier. The only law here is power. He moved with unexpected speed for a man his age, drawing a hidden derringer. Mason fired first, his bullet striking Blackwood's shoulder. The colonel staggered but managed to discharge his small pistol, the bullet grazing Mason's side. Gunfire erupted throughout the camp. Their mission had become a desperate fight for survival. Go! Mason ordered Kaya, pushing her toward the rear of the tent. Get the documents to your father. Kaya hesitated, knife in hand. I swore an oath, Mason told her, their eyes meeting in understanding. Justice, not vengeance. The documents will bring him down, not a bullet. After a heartbeat's hesitation, she nodded, taking the papers and slipping out through a slit in the canvas. Mason turned back to find Blackwood gone, blood trail leading outside. Following it into chaos, Mason saw Jackson engaged in a firefight near the horses, providing covering fire as Kaya ran for the perimeter. Blackwood was limping toward a group of his men, shouting orders. Mason gave pursuit, dodging bullets and returning fire. The night erupted in muzzle flashes and screams. A massive explosion rocked the camp. Jackson had reached the ammunition tent. Flames leapt skyward, casting hellish light across the scene. In the confusion, Mason lost sight of Blackwood. Then he glimpsed the colonel mounting a horse, spurring it toward the canyon path. Without hesitation, Mason seized the nearest horse, giving chase. The pursuit led up treacherous trails, moonlight barely illuminating the deadly drops on either side. Blackwood's horse was faster, but burdened by the colonel's weight. Slowly, Mason gained ground. At a plateau overlooking the vast desert below, Blackwood's horse faltered. The colonel dismounted, drawing his service revolver as Mason approached. "It always comes to this," Blackwood called, breathing heavily. "Two men and their guns. History written by the survivor." Mason dismounted, keeping his horse between them. "You're finished, Blackwood. Those documents expose everything. The false flag operation, the railroad deal, the officials you bribed." "You think that matters?" Blackwood laughed bitterly. "Men like me built this country, Cole. We'll own the West, Indians or no Indians. You're just a relic like them." "Maybe," Mason acknowledged, stepping clear of his horse. "But today this relic is bringing you to justice." They faced each other across 30 feet of moonlit stone, two men from a war that had never really ended for either of them. Blackwood fired first, his bullet whistling past Mason's ear. Mason's return shot struck true, sending the colonel's weapon spinning from his grasp. Clutching his bleeding hand, Blackwood sank to his knees. His eyes, once so cold and commanding, now held a desperate fear. "Finish it," he gasped. "You've waited long enough." Mason stood over him, Colt aimed at Blackwood's heart. 5 years of hatred, grief, and relentless pursuit distilled to this moment. His finger tightened on the trigger. Emma's face flashed in his memory, not as he'd last seen her, still and bloodless, but laughing in the sunlight. What would she think of her father now? Slowly, Mason lowered his gun. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not like you. I still have my honor." He bound Blackwood's wounds, then his hands, before loading him onto the horse. Justice would be served, but not by Mason's bullet. That choice, to resist the pull of vengeance, felt like his first free breath in 5 years. When they returned to the Apache village, they found it under siege. Blackwood's men, leaderless but enraged, had launched a desperate attack. The Apache defenses Mason had helped design were holding, but barely. Mason rode directly into the battle, Blackwood bound and visible to all. Jackson spotted them from a defensive position and relayed the news. Kaya had reached the village with the documents, but the attackers had kept fighting. "Your men are dying for nothing, Blackwood," Mason said, dragging the colonel to the front lines. "Call them off." Perhaps it was self-preservation, or perhaps some final shred of military honor, but Blackwood gave the order. Gradually, the gunfire diminished as confused attackers saw their leader captured. By dawn, an uneasy peace had settled. 17 of Blackwood's men were dead, 9 wounded. The Apache had lost 5 warriors and an elder. Both sides watched each other warily across a no-man's land of dust and blood. The standoff broke with the arrival of an unexpected party, a cavalry detachment led by a young lieutenant, responding to reports of violence. Mason recognized opportunity when it appeared. With Kaya translating, Mason presented the lieutenant with the documented evidence of Blackwood's conspiracy. The young officer, clearly unprepared for such complexity, defaulted to protocol, taking Blackwood into custody and ordering all non-military personnel to withdraw from Apache territory pending investigation. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was a beginning. More importantly, the Apache village was safe, for now. That evening, as the tribe gathered to honor their fallen, Chief Wolf Thunder summoned Mason to his fire. There, before his people, he named Mason Bear Who Stands, a title of respect reflecting both his tenacity in fighting Red Hawk and his stand against vengeance. The chief presented him with a ceremonial knife, a symbol of adoption into the tribe. "You fought not just for your justice," Wolf Thunder said, "but for our survival. This makes you blood of our blood." The celebration was tempered by reality. The railroad would not abandon its plans. This victory was temporary. Many of the warriors began discussions of moving deeper into the mountains, away from the encroaching white settlements. As night fell, Mason found himself beside the river that ran near the village. Kaya joined him, sitting in companionable silence as stars emerged above. "Will you stay?" she finally asked. Mason watched the water flowing endlessly eastward. "I can't. I need to testify against Blackwood. Make sure he faces consequences." She nodded, having expected this answer. "And after?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities neither dared name directly. "After," Mason said carefully, "I thought I might return. Chief Wolf Thunder mentioned needing someone to negotiate with traders, someone who understands both worlds." Kaya smiled, a rare, unguarded expression that transformed her solemn features. She reached for the medicine pouch she had given him, her fingers brushing his chest where it hung. "You saved our lives," she said softly, "but you have given something more precious, hope that our peoples need not always be enemies." In the silver moonlight, with the gentle sound of the river beside them, Mason felt something he'd thought forever lost, a future worth pursuing. The next morning, Mason prepared to depart. The entire tribe gathered to witness his leaving, no longer a stranger, but Bear Who Stands, their unexpected champion. Chief Wolf Thunder gripped his forearm in the warrior's farewell. "Return with news of justice," he said simply. Red Hawk presented him with a finely crafted bow, a warrior's gift to a respected equal. Last came Kaya, standing proud before her people. She placed her hands on Mason's shoulders, then touched her forehead briefly to his, an intimate gesture that spoke volumes. "The river always returns to the mountains," she said for his ears alone, "no matter how far it travels." As Mason rode away, following the cavalry detachment escorting Blackwood, he touched the medicine pouch at his chest. For 5 years, he'd been defined by what he'd lost. Now, unexpectedly, he'd found something worth protecting. Justice for his family was within reach, but for the first time since that terrible night, Mason Cole looked to the horizon with something besides vengeance in his heart. Sometimes a man's greatest battle isn't fought with guns or knives, but with the choice between hatred and hope. Mason had won that battle on a moonlit plateau, refusing to become what he despised. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The man who rode east that morning was not the same one who had encountered 4 Apache women in the desert. That man had been a ghost, haunting his own life. Bear Who Stands rode toward the future, carrying the weight of 2 worlds on his shoulders and the promise of return in his heart. The desert would keep his secrets and await his return.